Linear regressions, or equations of linear models. Find an equation by using data described in words. Find an equation of a linear model by using the data from a table. Well, how do we start with the first one? Here's our example. Using data described in words, the number of publishers in the United States has increased approximately linearly from 40,964 publishers in 1993 to 73,200 publishers in 2003. Let n be the number of publishers at t years since 1990. A. Find an equation of a linear model. B. What is the slope and what is the mean? And C. What is the n-intercept and what is the mean? Whenever you're working on word problems, I know since you probably love them, right? I highly recommend you read them at least 2 to 3 times. Don't assume the first time you read them is going to make sense. Hence the reason why I recommend 2 to 3 times at least. So, let's read it again. The number of publishers in the United States has increased approximately linearly from 40,964 publishers in 1993. So let's note the word linearly and the fact that it's increased 40,964 publishers in 1993 to 73,200 publishers in 2003. So 73,200 publishers when? In 2003. Let n be the number of publishers at t years since 1990. So let's realize also that they want us to use the variable n and the variable t. And the fact that they state that it's years since 1990. So since 1990 implies that this was the starting point. This is when they started counting, in other words. Or in other words, if you had a stopwatch, you started at 1990. That was your time 0 or your year 0. So that's a critical piece of information. When it started. It started in 1990. So now let's refer back to our linear equation y equals mx plus b, and the fact that we can use also our slope formula in this case, which is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Do remember, if the subscripts give you a hard time, please do not use them then. Just remember that in this case it implies our slope, okay? And to remember, our y-intercept for this case is the v-value, which we can write as the coordinates, 0, b. Instead, for the slope, let's try to use the more basic one. Just thinking about the fact that you have y on top of the x for the same coordinates, agreed? Or in general, the fact that it's just a fraction sign with a negative on top, negative on the bottom in the middle of the fraction sign. So, coordinates that we just figured out they gave us. In 1993, that's the year, they told us that there were 40,964 publishers. And we're assuming in this case probably book publishers, right? But general publishers. Okay, so T and N. And also, they give us another piece of information, another coordinate. In 2003, there were 73,200 publishers. Another piece of information with the T and N values on them. And let's convert them down to singular values. In other words, the years, convert them to singular years. Since this started in 1990, from 1990 to 1993, 3 years passed. That's why we renamed this with a 3 for the t value, or x value representative. So 3, 40,964. Likewise, from 1990 to 2003, there have been 13 years that have passed, agreed? And remember back to our basic variables, x and y, 13, 73,200. And now we want to calculate the slope. So once again, calculating the slope using our basic formula, which is a fraction, with a negative on top, negative on the bottom, in the middle of the fraction sign. Now let's use one of the coordinates. Remember, always the y on top of the x. So y value of 40,964 on top of the same coordinate x value, the 3. And likewise for the other side of our negative sign, 73,200, and the one that belongs to it, the 13, is the x for that particular coordinate. So y value on top of the x, that is the main criteria for this. Otherwise I could have swapped them around and wrote 73,200 over 13 first, and then the 40,964 over 3, and it would still work. But we just don't want to interchange x's and y's, agreed? Okay, so simplifying this means that once we subtract 40,964 minus 73,200, we get negative 32,236. And of course, 3 minus 13 will give us negative 10. And let's convert to a decimal. Why not? Since number is such a large number, it would only make sense that we could use a decimal. Agreed? So negative negative makes that a positive. 32,236 divided by 10. This is where your calculator comes in really handy. Double check with your calculator. Make sure I got the right number. 3,223.6 is our slope. In other words, how it's changing. In this case, it's a positive. So it's increasing 3,223.6 publishers per year. So there's our intermediate answer, and let's go back to our equation, y equals mx plus b. And let's plug in our slope, since we now know our slope. Y equals 3,223.6 x plus b. And let's use one of the coordinates, either the one with the 3, 40,964 or 13, 73,200, your choice. But make it easy for yourself. Always use smaller values, right? So I'll use the smaller value in this case to make it easier. 40,964 is the y value, and replacing also the x value of 3. So now we want to solve for b. So that implies simplifying. 3223.6 times 3 will give us 9,670.8. So we have 40,964 equals 9,670.8 plus b. So let's solve for b, meaning let's get rid of 9,670.8. It's positive, right? So let's subtract it then from both sides of our equation. Remember, what we do to one side, we must do to the other, and notice that 9,670.8 cancels out on the left and the right side. And now 40,964 minus 9,670.8 gives us 31,293.2. Once again, your calculator could be very useful. If you haven't taken it out, please take it out and double check the values. Remember, you can always pause the video at any particular location and double check what you see on there. So 31,293.2 is the v value. There's our other intermediate value. Finally, our equation is y equals 3,223.6x. That's the slope that we found initially. X plus the v value that we recently found, 31,293.2. Hey, but that's not our full answer, agreed? It's our intermediate answer only. What were we talking about in this case? Well, we're talking about publishers. Back then it was specifically book publishers. But in reality nowadays, who could be a publisher? What is a publisher, or who could be a publisher? Well, book publishers in many cases publish books, right? But nowadays there are many types of publishers. For instance, if you have a Facebook, you're publishing your life on Facebook technically, right? So you're a Facebook publisher. So in reality, a publisher is a person, right? Can we have 0.2 of a person or 0.6 of a person? Probably not, right? So our slope and y-intercept, we probably want to round them up to the nearest publisher for it to make more sense. So our final formula then, rounding the slope and the y-intercept to the nearest publisher. Notice our slope, 3,223.6. It's bigger than 5, right? The 0.6. It's 5 or bigger, so that means we add 1 more to the 3. Becomes a 4. So 3,224 in other words. Our v value, 31,293.2. The 2 is smaller than 0.5. Agreed? So that means we leave the number alone. We leave the 3 as a 3 at the end there. So 31,293 would be our value there. And that finally makes more sense because we have full number of publishers per year. So our number of publishers, n, equals 3,224 times the time would be in years, plus 31,293 publishers. And keep in mind, we started in 1990, therefore, with 31,293 publishers. Agreed? So there is our full equation now with somewhat corrected values to make sense of the fact that they are publishers.